Welcome to the Knock On Effect podcast, where concussion meets conversation, with Adam Wood and Cliff Butler. Brought to you by Safeguarding You and the Melbourne Headache and Concussion Group. Let's get into this. All right, mums and dads, boys and girls, welcome back to the Knock On Effect podcast. I'm Adam Wood, joined by my partner in crime, Cliff Butler. This is a podcast where we explore concussion, athlete safety, performance, and the broader impact that sport have on people's lives.
Hey Ads, thanks for the intro, mate. It's fantastic to be here. It's been a couple of weeks between drinks. I think we've all been pretty busy with our own local sports and cruising around with our own kids. So it's good to be back, mate. And we're absolutely stoked to be joined today by Rob Vai. He's a absolute superstar coach. We've got to give him a little bit of an intro. So he's a level 2 rugby coach. He's a strength and conditioning accredited coach as well. He's got a Bachelor of Health and Physical Education, Master of Teaching. He's into explosive speed coaching. Anything that you can get around coaching, I reckon Rob probably holds a ticket for. And he's also the owner and director of S2S Sports Australia. So Rob will talk a little bit about that in a sec, mate. We'll give you the mic to have a bit of a chat, but and also exciting, and I want to hear the story about how this went down, mate. Is signed by the West Tigers at age 13. So, Rob, welcome to the podcast, mate. Love to hear about your journey. So take it away, mate.
First of all, thanks heaps, guys, for having me here, Adam and Cliff. We've tried to organise in the past getting it sorted, and you guys are busy as well. But making the time for this, I think it's massive, and what you guys do is well needed. Not enough people talk about outside of physical in sport, what happens to the brain, which is physical, but the mental side of things with the brain, concussion, it's massive. So, yeah, look, to start off, rugby league's been my life for the best part of, the last, however long. I started playing footy at 8, fell in love with it, trained really hard, and thankfully by the age of 13 I was in the West Tigers district out at Liverpool Catholic Club. I was approached by Warren McDonald, who was the recruitment officer, who wanted to sign me at 13 on a 4-year contract. And from there, like I was saying before, he walked into my house, met my parents. I have 2 working class parents, one of Tongan descent, my father, with the surname Vai meaning water, and my mother as well. The 2 of them just absolutely loved the fact that I played footy and how much it did for me. So they never, ever pushed me into anything footy related. All they did was just support me. And I think that had a huge influence me later in life and in general. But Warren McDonald sat me down, signed me on a 4-year contract, and handed me a vintage West Tigers 18th man jersey, vintage Magpies, one of those jerseys, NRL. And he just said, look, all the best of luck, just work hard. And that's what I did. And for the 4 years I was on my contract, I got a lot of great benefits, like got to go to a great school in St. Gregory's College. That propelled me into university, getting good education and becoming, I guess, someone that used footy not only as my life, as a vehicle for other things. I went on after I finished at St. Gregory's College and with the Tigers. I think it was when I was 19, I was 20, I went down to Canberra and I was with the Canberra Raiders, NYC, which was then the National Youth Competition, everyone known as the Holden Cup. And played there for the year, just off the back of hard work. And I guess that's always been my sort of motto, like the harder you work, the luckier you get. And after Canberra, I came back to Sydney and I played at a few other places. Like I was lucky to go to St. Mary's, playing in the Sydney Shield and Ron Massey, and did a pre-season with the New South Wales Cup with the Penrith Panthers. And from there, I went on to Mounties, who fed to the Canberra Raiders. And then I went to Blacktown Workers, who we were aligned with Manly Sea Eagles. So pretty much after, I guess, those instances of being involved in those rep level from a younger age to then going into the men's competition, footy had done wonders for me. And I got to a stage where I guess my body wasn't coping too much. I done my ACL when it was 2020. It was in a preseason trial for Cup against Parramatta Eels. And I just blew my knee out, tried coming back the following year, but during that COVID period in 2020, that's when I did all my ACL rehab. It was very difficult. But yeah, once I came back, I developed, I guess, the leg length difference. I was limping on one side. I developed issues with my hip, my lower back, and then when I tried playing, I just kept having persistent issues. And for me, I never seen rugby league as something where it was like, oh, mateship, the boys, and things like that. I always sort of isolated myself and just hung out with those serious people, and that's all it was for me. I was just that real serious head in the corner that just was constantly obsessed and thinking about footy. So when my training and I guess my performance got heavily affected, I didn't really understand the value of other things outside of just you and your performance, such as your network connections and all those things. So anyways, point is, like, I got to a point where, yeah, body wasn't handling it too much. A hip specialist said, you're just going to have to persist with this, and eventually, like, these issues, you're just going to have to manage them week to week. It's going to be difficult. I was taking a lot of cortisone injections and stuff like that. I thought, you know what? I already dipped into the coaching space, and then that's when I started to take it a bit more seriously. So that was pretty much my playing in league. Had a lot of great coaches, and I think that people don't talk about enough. I think with sport in general, the networks it brings you, like my wife, even my nephew, like wherever I go, if I see someone, I will have a chat with them, whether it's at Penrith, Liverpool, Campbelltown. These were the areas that rugby league was, not safe haven, but it was a place where you gain so many connections. So when you say hi to people, it's like, hey, I know you from footy, and it's like 10, 15 years later. And then, getting jobs, coaching roles, everything comes back to, I guess, the connections through footy. And that's what it did for me, in a sense that, when it comes to playing and those positive things that came out of it, teaching, good connections, went to a great school. I think that's some of the noise that probably isn't made enough in the space around like junior development. Like, this is what you can get. Like, if I spilled a whole 10 kilo grains of rice, maybe one of those grains might play NRL. But think of all the other grains that you might turn out to be, that either outer layer of what success can look like. And I'm always, big on those sort of things. But that was my footy, I guess, journey. And I wouldn't say I retired. I guess I pivoted into coaching. And I guess this is where I am today.
Did your school going into uni, you said you went into uni, you were lucky enough to go to a good school and then get into uni. Did the uni have any connection into that pathway into coaching? Because obviously the elite, you were struck down by injury. At what point did you make the decision to get into coaching? And did uni have anything to do with that? What did you study there?
Well, it's funny, actually, my university journey, I started in exercise sports science. And I was really set on, again, I was so serious about training. Everything was around preparation. I thought NRL strength conditioning, that's where I'm going. And then from there, I quickly found out you had to do extra study as a part of it. And that pathway isn't so clear because it's a very, very competitive market. So I thought, I'll do something a bit safer, for family in future, whatever. And then I was actually working as a teacher aide at the time. And then the PE teacher, Rob Deacon, shout out to him. He was one of the great mentors I had, and he sort of said, hey, look, why don't you just get into teaching? And I think it was through there, I just thought, you know what? The university were great in helping me sort of switch everything over. And even when I went down to Canberra, I was still studying. But to link university to my coaching, a really great mentor, another mentor of mine, Andrew Benny, he was very big on, I guess, connecting me to the teaching side, to the coaching side. In terms of roles and things like that, and all the different things I got into, that was separate. But the development and the education that I received while in uni around these different mentors was massive. Like, I just always thought coaching was you just stand in front of a group and you motivate and you get, boys, we're big game today. But the development side was much, much deeper than that I actually pushed away that whole, leader like thing, like that whole leader side of things where you're the motivator and you've got to be the developer. And it was through the uni, through those, I guess some of the subjects that I did, not everything was always relevant in uni, as they say, but I found like the people that I was working under, I'm always a curious person. So I was very inquisitive. I was always questioning them around the teaching and coaching elements. And I guess they really helped develop me. Ian Moyers, Andrew Benny, like those are some of the names that I can throw out. But yeah, I definitely made the most of it while I was there. But if that answers
And the
your question.
teaching to development, was that the foray into what is now S2S Sport Australia? And can you explain, like, what problem were you trying to solve there, mate? Give us a little bit of background on S2S.
Yeah, so S2S started as I identified an issue in the female rugby league space. There was like no development whatsoever for female rugby league outside of, I guess, your only club coaching. And you had your club coaching and your juniors, and then you had your, I guess, your rep sort of stuff all the way up here in between. There was not really much at all. So I knew, like, when I started teaching and I did my ACL, a little bit into my teaching career, I was on crutches, and I decided to put my hand up to take a girls, be the coordinator for the girls rugby league at this one school I was at. And from there, I could see straight away in crutches trying to coach 13, 40-year-old girls who've never played rugby league. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I said, all right, we're just going to do some draw and pass. So what's that? Oh, like draw and pass. And I've got no one with me to demonstrate. None of the girls understood what I'm talking about. So anyways, like after I had these instances of like, it was just mind blowing. They were asking me questions I had never thought about. And a lot of the girls I had coached, yeah, they were just grateful that I was able to really think about it and break it down, only because they weren't getting it. And the more they were confused, the more it drove me to want to, I guess, learn that certain pathway of being able to actually educate and break things down and teach things properly, things that I wouldn't have thought, you teach boys. So anyways, after that experience at one school, I was lucky enough to get a role at the Hill Sports High School. I was in their rugby league program too. And I seen like the access to facilities, the access to resources, good coaching from the government school that I was at versus when I was at the Hill Sports High School at a sports school. I was like, there's a massive gap there, and this can be provided for all kids. And because I was in the female rugby league space, I decided, like I'm going to start, because there were so many people running clinics and, people that were just like, oh, footy clinic here, footy clinic there. I was like, okay, cool. I was like, what's missing? Like girls actually need that development. And I've seen it firsthand from my experience. It's a different way of coaching. It's a different approach. And I found out through then developing S2S and then creating that pathway for the girls to have something outside of, just their normal training, that development, that opportunity that we provided, I found that just had massive, massive impact on these players. And I guess from there, if you want me to talk about where it went to, so pretty much we focused, we're probably from what I found, we're the only group in Australia that had run specifically girl-only rugby league programs. And I couldn't believe there was like no one else that was doing it. And I've seen why. It is definitely a different style of coaching. It's a different challenge, but there's so many different benefits and rewards in terms of how you develop as a coach, that if there's anyone out there that is thinking of becoming a better coach, developing their coaching, go and coach a group of female players, a group of girls. They will teach you what you don't know about your own coaching, because it is just a completely different field. And I cannot say that my coaching is where it is now if it wasn't for all the young females, girls, women that I've had to coach, because they have helped me in massive, massive ways. So they were the reason why I guess I really found a niche in rugby league, that the sharpened tools of educating and coaching and breaking things down wasn't quite there. So eventually, what S2S went to was, specifically female-only programs. I think we were one of the first to run a women's preseason program. Like I had a lot of women that were approaching and say, hey, look, can we, is there a program we can run that's like female-only for women? And we did that too. We were trying to make, big moves there to provide that sort of opportunity. Musashi jumped on board. It was awesome. And then following this, we had so many of the parents of these girls who had sons that also wanted, I guess, the type of coaching we were providing. And then very quickly I found out with S2S and with, I guess, the approach we were trying to provide, it was all about building blocks. And I think what made us different was that I had a team of coaches who were teachers behind this rugby league drive of development. And then we then extended it to boys rugby league as well to cater to that, group as well. And so many people straight away, they found that, I guess, our style, our methods were, we just shifted it slightly for when we ran it for the boys programs, but we knew that there was a need for the education and development in rugby league that was lacking heaps. And our biggest specialty and our key area was tackling. Now, with tackling, for me, how I was able to develop that deep understanding that, not only through coaching the girls, which again, I'm so keen to dive into what it is around coaching tackling that, are considerations that probably aren't spoken enough about. It was my own experience. So going from playing at Canberra Raiders in the Holden Cup in years ago, back in 10 years ago, I then went back and started training myself around how to tackle and how to actually fix the problems I had in the past that I didn't realize. So what I found straight away, my feet, my head positioning, left versus right shoulder, the hip extension, all these little things. I was like, damn, I'm telling these kids to do this, but I couldn't even do it myself. So I was thinking, you teach rather than, than do. So I thought, you know what, this is a little project. So I started to build it up. I worked over a couple of months to the capacity that I could in the gym and stuff like that. I wasn't very strong. I wasn't, lifting heavy weights, but I realized you don't have to be bloody strong. You don't have to be moving mountains to make a good tackle. And with my limitations with my hip and my back, I didn't use that as an excuse. I said, I'm going in there. I'm giving everything I can. And then I just want to go and just play one game. I'll just jump in and play one game, keep it safe. And I did. Shout out to Syria Rugby League. They're incredible. So again, I'm Tongan Aussie, and they needed players. So I put my hand up and said, "Hey, is it alright if I play?" And then I jumped in. We versed Samoa and the Philippines, and straight away I realized in game mode the difficulty in tackling is completely different. So I went from fullback to the front row. So going from this switch, I thought, man, this is next level. I empathize and I can see, obviously, this is something that unless you have a deep understanding around, I'm trying to correct kids without knowing how it feels. So once I started to have that, even some of the men and the women I was coaching, I was like, man, I need to do as I say and, just really back up what I'm actually doing. So to come back to S2S and I guess our growth, I've gone just from, really catering to the female space to now extending to a wider, broader audience. And now even online, we've got so many people that we're reaching out to. I'm currently mentoring a coach over in New Zealand. We're mentoring other coaches here in Sydney. And I guess if it wasn't for these experiences, these mentors, and again, me throwing myself into areas that I knew that were the unknown and I wanted to develop and learn, I just thought, this is the way it's going to grow, and we want to grow it genuinely and with integrity. And I think that's why the reason I went back to going and playing to get a taste of it myself. And I'm still keen to do all that, but like I said, with the new baby here, it's probably going to be a bit no excuse. But
no. It's you just take your time, mate. But I think,
it. Yeah.
mate, I've just sat there in awe of that story, and I think it just shows why we're all sitting here together. That how important sport is in Australia for so many reasons. And from a working class kid in Sydney suburbs to now an educator, a motivator, just an entrepreneur. If I can use that tag for you, because sports got you there, and then it's opened up the vehicles and opened up all the little avenues for you to go, and that's why it's so important that we keep kids in sport, that we keep kids coming back to it, that we do safe sport, So I just think I sat there in awe, really, of what you were saying there, the start to the finish of your own experiences, your own sporting career, to now what you're doing and what you've seen. And just how important it is that we keep kids in sport, either safely. We're here for a concussion podcast, so we're here to talk about head impacts, but also your story was about mentors, about support, about growth, about just being guided through that process. So I don't know whether it's a purely Australian thing or what it is, but it does form so much of what we do here, and it provides so many people with so many opportunities. It's important that we have people like you developing it in a way that's, like you said, has integrity and safety and the player as its focus. And so I want to know, now that you're coaching and you've gone through that amazing journey, what are the gaps that you see in junior coaching, and how is S2S kind of specifically combating those?
Yeah, I think first of all, like with junior coaching, I just need to make it clear, like, we all know this. Junior coaching is such an under rewarded space. We're talking about volunteers, parents, people that aren't even parenting these kids who are taking up their time, to dedicate to help these younger kids who either, have a lot or no experience at all with coaching or playing, which again doesn't always go hand in hand, but it does help at times. The gap that we see, number one, it probably is that area of educating. So a lot of the kids, they just want to get there, they want to rip in, they want to play, and that's cool. But a lot of the times, what we find at clubs, what we see is that coaches get a little bit confused about, breaking things down and educating. So what they do is default to the one thing that is the most simplest thing that anyone can do, and that is just run, and just do fitness. And I empathize with these coaches, because the idea that players need to be fit versus players need to be technical, there's that fine line of fitness. And I'm a big believer that you need to be, balanced. But when it comes to, knowing how to deliver, because there's so many drills and so many things out there that people can run. But, and a big thing that I talk about, tackling, for instance, that's 80% of up here, like what's between the ears. 20% is the technique. So if we're teaching, drills that require, that much of the technical side, which is, it's still super, super important. If they go into it without knowing the true understanding and intention and motivation behind that actual drill, they're going to give you a half-ass effort. And that half-ass effort turns into a performance where they didn't learn anything, they didn't perform it properly, and they're going to hurt themselves. So, for me, I find talking and working with coaches is that the design of the drill and the intention and the teaching points and how it's layered, I find that that's probably the biggest gap as to how they're trying to implement it. I think tackling is probably one of the least resourced things that are out there in terms of drills and things like that. I'm not sure about AFL, but I have a mate that coaches pretty high in AFL. He's over at S2S Sports, and he says himself, tackling is a huge area that kids struggle with, but also coaches struggle with too. So I can see that across the board. For instance, I'll ask you guys a question. Can you guys dance?
No.
Do you have a rhythm bone in your body? Yes, 50% there. All right, want to know, yes and no. Okay, I'm going to chuck my hand in there. I'm going to say, I can't dance either. I couldn't dance. But out of the three of us, that's only, let's just say it was you, Adam. 33% of us have that coordination.
Can you show us, Adam?
We need to verify it. So,
we do. Later, it'll be in the bloopers. Adam's dancing.
So the reason I asked that, and it's funny because my sister is actually a dancer. We talk about coordination. Okay, not everyone is coordinated, but everyone can learn. You got adults taking dance classes. You take, people of all ages can do dance classes. Now think about coordination with someone running straight into you and a big car just driving straight into you. How are you gonna approach that? Now, for some of these kids who are as young as 10, they're versing kids that are 3 times their size. And some have it, some don't. But what are we talking about there? We're talking about, number one, coordination, and we're talking about the technique. So I always say the 2 T's are your toughness and your technique, right? Teaching that alone, you're separating 2 completely different areas, the physical and the mental. And if they don't have that, you look at a kid like a Liam Martin. So Liam Martin is probably one of the greatest examples I use. I always say you got to be a little bit crazy like Marto. You got to want to have that determination, that drive, but he has got absolutely brilliant technique. So he's got those two sides. Now, those are the two biggest factors that, again, with coaching, some coaches just get frustrated the fact that they're not that tough. All right. When I say tough, it's not in a disrespect that they're not. It's just a matter of that they're courageous. So I should use the word courageous, but I like using my alliteration with the two T's. So that courage you've got to deal with, again, is another gap in coaching where we look at, okay, how do you deal with someone that's courageous, someone that doesn't have technique, someone that has both, someone that has neither? So I think that's probably the biggest areas. Again, I think language, like what does staying square mean? Like that's probably one of the biggest things I tell coaches. How would you define staying square? And they'll be like, oh, like staying straight. Well, why don't we just say that? Like, why can't we create a language for young people, players, and let's be real, like even grown adults, which I still work with. I have to explain, look, this is what square means. And there's no shame in that. And I think how we connect and get things truly understood in again, I'm just going to talk about tackling mostly because it's probably, I'd say, the most difficult area. That's an area that I think in the coaching space is lacking, to be able to create things that are comprehensive but are well understood across many players. And that's called accessible learning, right? So we look at schools. Are we going to chuck a dictionary at them, or are we going to give them really easy chunks of terminology to give them? So I feel like what's really lacking is not the fact that there's not enough drills out there. It's not enough, it's not enough phrasings. It's not enough, breaking downs. It's not enough identification. And probably the other biggest area is the criteria. A lot of coaches, I'll say, all right, what's the most important thing in a tackle? They'll say their head. I'm like, that's absolutely true for safety. But what actually makes a strong tackle? And probably the biggest not misconception, but the under talked about area is the hips. Like no one talks about the hips because the hips is the strongest part of your tackle, right? What do NRL players get tested on? And every junior development player gets tested on? Squat, maybe a trap bar deadlift, and then a jump. And where does the power come from? It comes from your hips. And a thing that I like to teach is the half strength, full strength. So if I'm looking, like you talk about hip hinge, most adults go to any personal trainer, any strength conditioning coach. Hip hinge is the most difficult thing to teach to anyone. So if you're telling me, if this is half strength, you're standing up to be able to go like this. If people don't know how to bend, and then they don't understand to use their hips, and then you've got a split squat stand. So you've got that, and then that. Sorry for that demonstration, but if you if you can't break down to a player that the source of power is coming from these two movements, areas, however you may like to present it, then how are we going to teach how to make a strong tackle if we just want to be, all right, here's where you put your head? Everything's got to align with this. And I think, there's another area. You've got safe tackles and you've got stupid tackles. All right, you want to be doing a stupid tackle, you're just going to fly out the line and hurt someone for your benefit, for your TikTok views, for your approval of someone else saying great hit. But like we're looking at rugby league as you're eventually going to play 80 minutes. Are you going to do stupid tackles for 80 minutes? What would a coach want? What would your next level development rep coach, NRL coach want from you? To do something stupid or to do something safe? Now, safe is strong, right? But I think that's another misconception. It's like, people use the word basics. I'm coaching tackle technique. Is it basic to put your body in a certain position? Is a hip hinge basic? Is a split squat basic? Like people need to really reframe how they use that word basic because it is fundamental. It is like the concrete we lay. And if you do a poor job laying that concrete, you're going to have a very, very poor house that's going to shift and fall over and break down. So the building process, number one for me, is correctly putting that foundation before any building blocks. Now, we talk about what do coaches struggle with as well. Identification. Like if we're talking about, for me, like tackle testing, and I'm looking at, all right, what are the key things I'm looking for? Like what I just mentioned at the start was where do you put your head? Totally agree. But it's where you put your shoulder, where you put your feet, and what you do with your hips. Like those for me are the three big things. And if coaches can't identify it, and coaches can't, like if a mechanic, takes my car and can't tell me what's, what they're going to expect to be wrong with it and what they're going to think about, all right, at 10,000 Ks, or so at 10 years old, I'm probably going to expect this. At 15 years old, I'm probably going to expect this. It's a bit different for tackling because, again, like you're going to get so many variations. I've seen some 8-year-olds tackle better than 16-year-olds, right? But if you don't know how to diagnose, again, like how are we going to build better habits? How are we going to correct them if we can't detect them? Does that make sense?
No, you've got to be able. You've got to have. What would I say? Like touch points where you go, like, can they do a hip hinge? Can they do this? Can they do that? Does this happen? Does that happen? And the hip hinge for me, mate, as an osteopath, don't even talk to me about it, mate. It's like thing. But I think the thing that I come to with this as well, like, and obviously you're an educator, is communication. Sounds like a massive one here because, my golf coach will say to me, there's 3 reasons why you can't do what you want to do. Maybe 4, because you're not good at it. But the first one is you don't know where to be. So your body movement, like you're saying, you square this, that, you don't know how to hip hinge, you don't know how to do that. The second one is you don't know how to get to where you need to be, which is the education piece, which is someone saying to you, stand face on, not stand square. So where do you need to get your body to, and being educated by the coach about that, saying this is where the body needs to get to. Or the third one is it's a bit of both. Maybe you don't know where you need to be and you can't get there. So for me as a 46-year-old tragic trying to swing a golf club, my upper back's pretty stiff. I find it hard to rotate. Then again, I don't know where I need to rotate to. So I'm probably not a very good golfer. And it's the same thing with the kids, and like you said, you've got dodgy hips and a dodgy back. So you may not be able to get us into that position as well as you want to, but you know what that position is. Does that make sense? And then you can execute that. So I think communicating to the kids, and not everyone's going to get the same cues. I could say something to Adam that Adam goes, bang, whereas I could say it to you and you go, what? So, I think that's a massive thing, is that communication piece sounds huge. Being able to identify
situational awareness, right?
What's that?
And would situational awareness play a role? I mean, obviously in rugby league, it's very front on. You're coming in AFL, which Cliff and I probably spend more time around. It's a 360-degree game, so there's an extra element of being able to replay that's coming from behind you as well. And there's a couple of things you've said, Matt. Look, the fact that you're very much involved in the women's game in AFL, the growth in the women's game has probably been very similar to NRL. With having the NRLW, same for us. It's now we're seeing girls, and we're both heavily involved with junior football clubs here in Melbourne. The growth in the women's game, or the girls' game in the junior sport, has been incredible. But and now not just the volume of and the type of players that are playing here, but you're also coming from way further back, that a lot of these girls haven't played from under 8s, juniors, Auskick, or these really young programs. So trying to educate them on how the game, the situational awareness. Then you've got the tactics. Then may come the toughness, right? I think you're right in the toughness and technique and tactics, but it's got to come from education of the game, right? And I guess with communication, is that a big part of it as well when you're coaching young girls?
Yep, communication's everything, right? Like if the message isn't clear, we're just gonna lay poor concrete, and then the rest of it's just gonna build in a bit of confusion. Things are gonna start to wobble and shake later. And I find communication, like, no matter what group I'll coach, they'll give me the feedback around what links to them. So, for example, I used to use, with a group of girls, I used to say, load and launch, load and launch. And then when you load and you launch, there's a movement in that, and you got to load, explode, whatever. And then one day there was a boy that turned around and said, oh, like springs. And I'm like, yeah, sort of like springs. So with a wider range of like people that you coach, they'll give you an understanding of what is the most easiest to digest. And I think that's what we as coaches, whether it's girls, boys, and I'll specifically focus on the females with young girls. some of them tackle better than the boys, but it's what links to them and helps them be able to click and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let me change it. It's not always a straightforward process, but what we've found is that if we can make that process from here to here much shorter in time and much more effective, it is, again, like if you coach a group of girls, you're going to you're just going to be exposed to so many different types of techniques. I still feel like I've seen it all, but I haven't. Like, I've seen so many different styles of tackles. So when I'm communicating with them, I'll see what responds to them. And I'll have a rule of 3. I'll give them 3 turns. I'll sit back, usually because I'm a very big talk, I'll just jump in and I'll be like, oh yeah, you need to fix that. But I'll give it the rule of 3 and I'll see whether or not it clicks to them and whether they'll say, oh, I didn't launch, or oh, I didn't load, oh, I didn't sprinkle my feet. If it doesn't click and if it doesn't connect, then I've got to go back and look, okay, well, what is the real processing issue here? And I think everything to do with coaching with girls, like here's what I like to think about, all right? Like, and I think this may be a misconception with coaching girls. If you got a group of boys to go and learn ballet, they're going to struggle with not understanding the movements. They might need a different way. And again, boys do ballet, but let's say netball or a sport that is completely foreign to a group of boys. The difference I notice, boys are, depending on the environment and things like that, if they're not trying to be like cool, they will throw themselves into it, right? And they will throw themselves into it, ask questions later. That's for majority of boys. Whereas girls, they'll sit back, assess, and if they don't feel comfortable and if they don't feel like they have a lot of confidence in what you are presenting, they won't run in and give it a try. So one's more about, if I put a brick wall up, I love this analogy. I say if I brick wall up and I told 100 young boys, listen, if you run into this will make you an NRL player. Guaranteed. And then I probably wouldn't need much about it. If they believed in everything I said, they'll do it. And after the 10th time, they'll be like, what, am I doing this wrong? Is this working? Whereas girls, they'll sit back. And if I gave them 100 lifted benefits and said, this is how you do it, like this is why we do it, this is the explanation, then they'll be like, all right, you know what? I can buy into what you're saying. I'm going to run into that brick wall. But when they do it with absolute like trust. And when they have your trust, that's when it starts to turn into, okay, this is trust turns into confidence. Confidence eventually turns into toughness. And in rugby league, you need that toughness. There is no ifs or buts. If you don't have that toughness, which looks different to every single player, then that's where I guess you're going to struggle as a coach. You just really need to draw out, especially for the female players, that trust that what you're saying and what you're delivering not only is backed by, I guess, evidence. You can show them on the spot. You can give an example. You can show them the right way, show them the wrong way. They need to believe in what you're saying, but they need to have trust in you that you are going to provide for them. Whereas if I just was an ex-NRL player and said, hey, young fella over there, run into that brick wall, they'll just do it because they're just, they're focused on that external. Whereas the girls are focused on having that internal, I guess, trust in things. From what I've found. Now, don't get me wrong. Some girls from the country, shout out to those girls that they came to Central Coast. I forgot what area they were from, but my goodness, I dead set would have just chucked them against a group of 13-year-old boys, and there would have been some boys that would have come out hurt because they just had that toughness. And again, or not toughness, they just had that lack of preservation. They had that lack of doubt. Whereas the doubt that exists within the female players, I must say, there are so many more and more boys that I'm finding that are having that doubt as well. But it just looks different in every element. And I've always found you have to coach girls differently. You have to assess before you coach anyone. I get that. But I feel like there's so many things that you can take away from coaching both, that you can adapt to both, that are so interchangeable between the two that I guess all girls and boys in rugby league play against each other from the age until the age of 12. But when they start to hit their teenage years, especially as a high school teacher, you see that difference straight away in the social elements and social aspect and mentally. But at the end of the day, if we want to get the message across and be clear with our communication, we really need to drive home the fact that, number one, do I have your trust? Number two, do you understand what I'm saying? And number three, what you've just implemented. Did it work? Why not? okay, what works for you? Is it using the word springs? Is it use the word explode? Do we have to change the movement slightly? And then sometimes, no matter boy or girl, you get someone with a bad attitude, and I'll be like, look, I get you want to do it your way. You've done it at your rep club, but guess what? We're here now. I want you to give this a go, okay? And then after you give this a turn, you compare whether it works or not. But I don't want to hear your attitude. I don't want to put up with it. Yeah? Do the drill. So that is like a 0.5% of occasions, because really, like parents who sign them kids up, they want to do it. So
it sounds like to me what we're saying here is when you are competent, then you become confident. You know what I mean? So you want toughness, that comes from competency, it comes from belief, and then you can go, right? And one of the things that I loved about you were on the ABC, and you were doing exactly what you've just talked about, working with the female NRL players. And one of the things that really struck me was, Adam and I come on here and we talk about, recognize, when someone's been concussed, and remove the player when you think they're concussed, and refer them off. And it's all very reactive. And so the thing that excited me today about talking to you was that the stuff that you do, whether you're just trying to improve players and improve the game, but also you're making it safer. And so you're a little bit more upstream and preventative, maybe even a word that we want to use. Like you're trying to prevent injury. And we've talked about the head in the tackle. I want to just dial in a little bit into the specifics and the biomechanics of the tackle that you focus on, because we spoke kind of off air about moving the feet and how some kids just throw their body at it. And I saw a video of, there was a guy who did his MCL. I can't remember what team he played for, but it was one of the guys comes to tackle him. He's tired. It's the last quarter. He comes in, he's sloppy. He throws his whole body at the guy, misses the hips, hits the knee, and bang, off goes the MCL. He's injured a player. The guy's out for 6 or 8 weeks. So I think it's that thing where, what do you see? What's a bad tackle look like? What's a good tackle look like? What's the recipe to a good tackle that helps prevent injuries, whether they be concussions or any other kind of injury?
Yep. So we have a 5-step tackle process. So we've got your movement off the line. So we call that shoot. And then you've got your pre-tackle movement, which is called your sprinkle feet or your steadiness.
Sprinkle feet, I like that.
Yeah. And there was a girl who was playing over rugby union over at Parramatta 2 Blues. Shout out to her. I'm terrible with names. I'm a teacher, but I'm terrible with names. But she, out of the whole group that was doing this tackle tech drill, right before she made contact, I seen her feet go. I was like, sprinkle feet. She's the only one that's doing it. We all say steady your feet, shorten your feet.
Is that a lot of ladders and stuff? Do kids, are you doing is it how do you train the sprinkle feet? Is it do you jump on a ladders and you're doing in and out and, what are they, icky shuffles? Or do you specifically train that with those guys? Yeah.
Absolutely. My biggest thing I say in tackling, if you don't want to get beat, you've got to fix your feet. You can either have concrete feet or you can have sprinkle feet. And if you're sprinkling, you're steady and you're ready. And then I've got this other one. You saddle, right? So there's another foot movement we call saddling. So if I say you're steady, you're ready, and then, I'm not going to do this, but when someone steps into a tackle, you've got that split squat stance. But how do you get from a sprinkle feet to a split squat stance? If someone's running dead straight at you, you're shuffling into the tackle. You're stepping in a movement. You're not sprinkling all the way until you go bang, because that's what people do. And just for the viewers at home, I'm just going to show you an inside exclusive to my floor over here. It's a little bit dirty. But pretty much, foot movement, 101. When you tackle, you're moving in like this. People with concrete feet, everyone hear that? I'll do it louder. That's the concrete feet we talk about. But if people move like that in that motion, whereas I can see in soccer, they're very, very good at teaching feet. Whereas they'll teach in the backwards movements if there's a soccer ball there, they'll stay in that position. And I'm terrible at soccer. I played it as my first sport, but how they teach and coach feet as well to not get ankle broken. And these are guys that are dealing with a soccer ball between their feet. We're just talking about rugby league players running at each other. It's much harder, I guess, in soccer to try and beat someone with a soccer ball, but it still happens. It still happens. So in league,
if you're coming in with those concrete feet,
around.
Sorry, mate. If you come in with those concrete feet and you go bang, and a bloke's running at you that's the size of a Toyota Hiace, you've got nowhere to go, right? So if you're coming in, like you're saying there, side on, you can go with them, you can go that way. You've got so many different options here. And this is what we talk about in AFL is, you've got to be adaptable in that tackle in that moment to be able to go, am I going to take them with? Am I going to take them this way? You're less likely to get injured and hurt, not just concussion, anything. If you're flat like that, I wouldn't want you running at me while I'm flat, mate. That would not be good for my health, I wouldn't have thought.
Well, Cliff, that's the thing, right? If your concrete feet are set, the key and the answer is hip extension.
Right.
So if I'm still running at you and your feet are stuck, I call that half strength because your foot and momentum, because you're not moving at me, you're stuck there. But what you can do is that you can still load and launch through me using your hips. So that's what we try and teach because I think players need to understand there's no such thing as a game of perfect tackles. You will make tackles upon tackles. Unless you make one tackle in a game and it's really good and you're in the wing, then yeah, I get that. But in a real game of rugby league, you are constantly making tackles that are in various positions, right? And now, one thing I teach to the coaches as well, I say, how many different types of tackles are there? There's if you break down what side I'm holding the ball, what angle I'm running, if you're chasing me on a line break, if I'm running dead straight at you, if I step to your left shoulder, if I step to your right shoulder, if I try and bump you low, if I stay up tall, if I'm a tall player, if I'm a short, if I'm a wide player, you're looking at roughly 12 different types of tackles. And for players to understand the crux of it, your foundation starts with how you move. And if you can move well into a tackle, that solves a lot of problems. What happens after that again is as a whole nother set of teachings. But again, if we can just give the players and coaches an understanding that we need to get these things right, which is why it's never taught in isolation. I can't be like teaching footwork and agility and things like that if I don't give context, which I think comes back to your point, Adam, around situational awareness, right? Like every different tackle has a different scenario. And one thing I really enjoy about coaching is that we're not teaching them a skill. We're teaching them a moment. Because what do you see on the highlights reel? You see moments. Now, what won't get plastered on highlights reels on NRL.com is, a one-on-one, strong, effective tackle that might happen over and over and repetitively. That's the stuff that is expected. But if I have, a 10-year-old that's in a game that makes a really strong, effective, safe tackle that, stops the opposition, that's a moment. That's a moment I've taught. If I see someone chasing, they've got good body, they've got a good body angle to someone, they get them slapped down the fend, tackle around the hips, they load, launch, whatever it may be, even in attack. If they get into two big, huge players they're running at, but they get the ball, they step on an angle, they, tuck and bump and find a quick play the ball, I'm plastering that all over the highlights and pumping up their tires around the moments that they had produced, the moment that they were able to execute. Because one skill in isolation, that's swimming, that's sprinting, that's shot put, that's discus. We are talking about repetitive, different scenarios, all these different things that can happen. So that's what people don't understand is that rugby league, especially if you're at Penrith, you've got different sizes, different shapes, different weight, different execution, different style of running. Like there's so many things we're trying to jam pack into a skill. Why not teach a moment? All right, well, we've got this sort of moment. We're teaching, well, what happens if a tall player runs at you? All right, what happens if a short player who's a lot wider set runs at you? So yeah, it all comes back to me. It all comes back to moments we're trying to reproduce.
Yeah, and the moment
question.
I think the moment that's most often is covered on TV is when you've got a fullback trying to chase down a try-saving tackle off a winger. And you're right. I'd love to know those 12 different types. But can you go back one step, mate? You said there was five steps to a tackle.
Yep.
What was the first one? Was it shoot? Did you say?
You shoot off the line. Then there's pre-tackle, you sprinkle your feet, and then there's in-tackle, and then there's the wrestle component, or I guess the control, and then you've got the groundwork, so then marker, so then you just reset. So with those 5 steps comes every different set of, I guess, moments and skills that you're trying to produce. And yeah, in the end, like if you're skipping certain steps, that's where the gaps start to show through. And if we don't teach things in a wholeness to say, oh, this is part of this, because what happens if we teach the collision part, and what happens if we teach the in-tackle part, and then someone's retreating back really late and their movement off the line is different? Well, we're going to have to adjust that to look at, okay, sometimes we get to move up and be in a nice square or a nice straight position. But then what happens if we turn around and as soon as we move off the line, you've got Reece Walsh coming at you with footwork? Or if you've got Payne Haas coming at you, like someone of that type of runner in your age group, like what's that going to look like? So those are the processes that we try and break down and teach for the players.
And the difference between, sorry, Cliff, just one more, mate. And I'm a mad Melbourne Storm member, mate, so I love my rugby more so than most Victorians. The difference between a tackle that leads to a HIA and doesn't is millimetres, right? Like there's so many tackles that are done in rugby league, obviously, or rugby. Head positioning, I mean, there's some pretty obvious ones, right, where they just get their head wrong and they're knocked out, or, leads to a HIA. Is there and there's 5 different stages to a tackle and 12 different scenarios or different types. But is there a simple rule that you would follow around trying to position heads? And for the kids that might, and the parents and the coaches that might listen to this pod, what could they take away from this to try and think about? And in AFL, we have coaching, we have tackle coaches. Like at our club, we bring in tackle coaches because it's such a specialised skill, as clearly you know. Is there some takeaways that we could, that you could share around head movement? Obviously, when it comes to concussion, really important part of a tackle as well. Are there ways in which you can try and teach? Are there things, or is it too circumstantial to break down in a couple of minutes?
Well, what I find is that a lot of the tackles that go wrong is because people use the wrong shoulder. Now, we talk about head positioning, which is absolutely crucial, but the first part of the body that hits in a tackle is the shoulder. So where do we position the shoulder rather than where do we position the head? If we lead with teaching, and I find a lot of the time, if I use, like my terminology is belly button. Why belly button? Everyone's belly button is in the center, in the core, in the very middle of their body. And it's actually, well, for me, it's the softest part of your body, right? So in that area, it's a safe space to put your shoulder, and it's a safe space where your head can position itself and tuck in. So then I'll say, all right, if we're putting our shoulder there, where do we put our head? And then I'll say, okay, well, what happens if he runs on this angle? What happens if he or she runs on this angle? Where do we position our head? So that becomes near foot, near shoulder. So if they're nearest to me over here, I've got to tackle with this shoulder. Now, the biggest problem that happens in rugby league is that people do not run straight every single run. It is the footwork. And now we look at the development, right, in rugby league coaching. Your good old school, go for runs and start, get fit. That was the old school coaching. A bit of gym. Now kids are developing. We're seeing kids as young as 8 or 9 who we are training their feet and we are training their agility and training their control, and their stepping is like phenomenal, like better than a lot of teenagers. But then you think, if you're stepping that good in attack, what's happening in defense for the other players? Well, we're always seeing highlights of kids that are just running full field. And again, rugby league for me is a game of bull rush if we're not teaching the right things. Because then if one kid's just gone from one end to the other, bumping kids off, don't get me wrong, it's incredible skills, right? But where's all these tacklers? Like, where are the tacklers on the field? Are there any tacklers here? You know what I mean? And you can't really blame the kids, because are they being taught? Kids might just be at phenomenal levels with the ball. Now, when it comes back to how do we break down good tackles? Well, you just need to get your shoulder in the midline, in the belly button. And then I'll do other things, like I'll chuck a phone, play a song, put it in my pocket. You got to listen, like try and listen for the song. that could be something that where kids is just entertaining them while teaching them, because sometimes it's just very boring. I'll get them again to show me, all right, what shoulder you're tackling with inside, and then I'll step them and I'll be like, all right, keep tackling me, and then they'll put their head in front. Now again, that change of direction, that sprinkle feet, that saddle, all that comes to footwork. That's where players get caught, and not enough defensive agility gets taught, and defensive footwork is at the crux of our programming at a junior level. And I'm seeing more and more and more rep players, even reserve grade players, like NRL players. And again, I never try and talk down on NRL players, but they just get caught in the wrong positions because they are fatigued. Mate, I get tired watching them go back to back to back. And if I think that, well, they're struggling with this is a common issue, then again, it comes back to how our feet are positioning. So if we understand where to put our shoulder, when the feet get tired, that can complement a safe and strong tackle. Not only a safe tackle, but a strong tackle too, with momentum moving forward. Now, the big thing that I find, and when I diagnose any player, it's left shoulder tackles. Now, quiz, put your hand up if you're right-handed. 100% of us here are right-handed. The world is 90% right-handed. What does that mean for left shoulder tackles? Well, a lot of the time, not all the time, left shoulder tackles are the weaker points. Why? Is because everyone, like riding with your hand, shooting with a basketball, passing a footy, everything is practiced heavily predominant on the favored side. And going back to coaching, what can we tell coaches? Well, we need to be bilateral. We need to be practicing on both sides just as even, but we need to make it aware that players do have a preferred side, not a weaker side. Well, yeah, they are weaker, but for some people, I don't like saying weak. Look, you will have a stronger and a weaker side, but we need players to understand you can have a strong side and a stronger side. And so with that, if they don't understand that one side needs a little bit more work than the other, what's going to happen in the last minute of a game when a big forward is running at them and they step him on their weaker shoulder? They're going to turn and tackle with that shoulder. Now, everyone's seen the Reece Walsh tackle, all right? So he put his head on the wrong position. If you go back, and I did a video on this, over the last, ever since he came into the NRL at the Warriors, he favors his left shoulder. He's brilliant. He puts on very strong tackles with his left shoulder. So what happens when someone runs that? So this is my left. So someone runs this way and then steps to his right. He will then pivot and turn his body to then still tackle with his left shoulder and then get hit in the head. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, if anyone watched that try-saving tackle on my beloved Storm, they did the same thing to stop Warbrick. He ran at him, and instead of tackling with his outside shoulder, he tackled him with his preferred stronger shoulder. So parents out there, really pay attention to what shoulder they favor, and no matter what angle the player's running at, are they making the correct tackle with the correct shoulder? Near shoulder, near tackle. Near foot, near shoulder, near tackle. Is it happening, or are they struggling with one side versus the other? So that's what I find is probably the biggest issue, is that how they present their feet, what they prefer, and then the rest can just turn into a big mess. So that's how I find, to answer your question, Adam, yeah, like when it comes to safe tackles, that was another 20 minutes talking about it. But again,
I love that. No, it's awesome. That was brilliant. Yep. That's the soundbite, mate. That's going to go on Instagram. That's exactly what we want to hear is how what's the actual specific biomechanics, and what can people take away from this right now. There might be AFL coaches, NRL coaches that go, I need to go and put that into ChatGPT or Google and work out what I'm doing on Thursday or Tuesday with my kids, going by the ladders and get the sprinkle toes going, because it's not hard to do, but you've just got to change your perception. And being an educator is to go, right now, this is something that we need to implement into training. Now, speaking of training, because we've been here for a while, and obviously this week there's been a massive change in the NRL, and hats off to them. We're talking about reducing the amount of contact training at training. So as it stands, I'm not sure if anyone's aware of where that stands at the moment. We're going. I don't have to read this because we're going to 100 minutes per week per player. And then a 35-minute cap on high intensity contact, a ban on consecutive days, And then at the start of the season, you've got to have graded introduction of contact. So a huge step. I think it's in the right direction personally, as a person that works in this space. So my question to you is, I'm a practitioner. You're a coach and an educator. How do you feel about this change?
Look, how do I feel? It doesn't affect me whatsoever because they're the NRL players. And why I say that is I think for the NRL players, whatever works best for them, I think it's in their corner. I don't think the game's going soft. I think the game is going to a new era of physicality that only, like I said, my eyeballs can just watch and I'll just get tired and think, oh, how the hell are they doing that again and again and again? To do that many tackles, in a week, like we're talking like a training and in games, it seems, because what I'm coming back to is I'm looking at who had agreed on this. What was the reason and push for the change? And from what I'm reading, it's the RLPA and the NRL. And I think power to the players. I think if that's what they are after, if they are feeling that, it's going to be a reduction and prevention around, those sort of things, maybe that might be a prompt to look at how can things be done instead of 200 hours. How can we do things in 100 hours that is more effective and that is more efficient? So I think that's going to raise a lot of push towards, all right, how can we now find the best practice methods for our NRL players, the top of the top, the echelon of where everyone wants to get to. So that sends a message to show that they're getting treated with the respect that they are now going to be having, I guess, more respect given to them around what they're wanting. And it seems like they just want to have, more ability to, I guess, have a say in what they need for their training. And I think that's great. And like what you're saying as well, they're now taking certain things seriously. What things they're taking in particular more seriously, I'm not too sure. But have you guys read much into this? Because from what I'm gathered, it just seems like it's a push from both NRL and RLPA, which again, I'm always going to back the players in a sense of player welfare and safety. But yeah, what have you guys read about it?
So my take on it is, and I need to be tread a little bit carefully here, is that there are links now, and this research is evolving in this space extremely rapidly. It's almost day by day. And so what my take as someone who treats concussion, who works in this space, is that we're now starting to see some linkage between, it's not the big hits, it's not the big smash that, that we see. It's the recurrent and repetitive small impacts that are leading to long-term brain health problems. So I think that this is a recognition of that. So that's why I feel like it's absolutely huge, because the NRL are coming out and saying, well, we acknowledge that recurrent small impacts throughout the week may be leading to long-term brain injury effects. And so therefore we're going to limit the amount of time that we expose our players to contact during the week. For me, that's huge. That's enormous. That message is enormous. I really hope that the AFL follows suit, because like we said at the start, sport is so important in Australia and a lot of money and research follows sport. And so if the NRL's coming out and saying, well, we're doing this, we believe this, then I think the money will flow towards the research to prove whether they're right or wrong. Because at the moment, we're kind of saying recurrent impacts may create this issue. If we can say for certain that it does, and then we can take steps to create safe training. And Rob, you're part of that. Like what we've just heard over the last hour is phenomenal, mate. I can't take my hat off to you enough. That I don't know if you understand how massive what you're doing is, that safe cueing, confidence, trust, all the words we use today, you're really focusing on making the game safer for kids, and your intricate knowledge of the game is just such so important for what you're doing. And S2S, anybody out there, get on get on Google and check it out, because you're doing amazing stuff. And you were just down here in Sunbury recently, so you're obviously traveling around and getting it done. But to come back to, what I think with the NRL and why it excites me is it's a huge move. It's a massive move. They've moved first. They've moved early. They've moved hard. I reckon they're leading the way. Should the AFL follow suit, hopefully we'll get some comments around this.
And I just make the connection between, like, you would think that this would eventually follow downstream into grassroots. I think this is a watch this space, because how will it be managed at grassroots? Like, when at NRL, AFL, they've got coaches and teams, and they've got all the care and the administrators to manage it. It'd be interesting to see how would a local footy club, local rugby club, actually manage minutes and time, and it'll be I'm sure it'll be a bit harder, but I imagine that's probably where this would go, right? Most things follow downstream.
Yeah, look, I've always advocated for more time, like a mandatory set period during every training session spent on tackle technique, whether that be just alone in the footwork, alone in the collision. You've got those 5 stages, right? But how it's actually overseen as to whether they're just doing this big run it straight, type of drills that aren't relevant at all to a continuous flow of a rugby league game, or if things aren't even being done at all. That's the tricky part. And again, the big gap there is how coaches can implement tackle technique drills and addressing different areas of tackling every single session, because I think what happens every single game, it's tackling and holding a ball. So that's probably the 2 biggest things that should be done every session. But how it's monitored and how it's regulated in terms of, all right, how's it being implemented? Are they teaching the right things? Because I've seen in the US, there are great, because I like thinking of drawing from every single sport, right? And in gridiron, there are people that are teaching, if you're running at this shoulder, you tackle, or you tackle with this shoulder. So it's unsafe. So are other coaches teaching that? I don't know, because you're basically just teaching them how to get into a car crash. But
I can't believe that doesn't get taught, Rob. Like you talk about, footy, you got to be able to kick left and right. All that's dropping out of the game. I think Dacos has put that to bed lately with his amazing outside foot kick. But my kids play lacrosse. If you can't throw left hand, you're going nowhere. Basketballers are using both hands now as well. I just can't believe in a game that's predominantly tackling that you don't have both left and right in your arsenal. That's crazy.
Yeah, and again, we're trying to teach players the importance of having confidence, having competence, having toughness. How can we do that if we're not emphasizing them building their blocks to be able to actually make strong tackles, or even 1 out of 5 tackles to be a strong one? Because every week players just going to jersey grab, and if we're not trying to address that, which is not easy, don't get me wrong, it's not something that you can just flick the switch and be like, all right, we're working on tackling today, here's a couple of cones, let's just run at each other. It is highly technical. It is, it's very draining, and it's not fun. I've had to find ways to make it fun and enjoyable and competitive. And when I say fun, not everything has to be fun, where it's let's play this, head, shoulders, cone. No. You have to make it competitive, but you also have to make it where it's, I want to actually play this. I actually want to do this, because it can get very boring. And then it's a big drain of terminology and very technical. But like I said, if we're looking at a junior level, the landscape in the junior space where tackling, isn't, again, from what I know, from what I've seen in different states, over in Canberra and in Melbourne and Sydney, let's be real. We need to give more attention to how coaching tackling can then can be a conversation for all, and how we can actually come to agreement that, all right, well, as a club, let's sit down and let's look at, as a club, what are we teaching them over at such and such under 8s all the way through to an open player. What is that going to look like? And if some are advancing, how can we push them even more? And yeah, I think when we talk about this NRL implementing this 100 minutes, we're talking about the top of the top. These guys at the bottom don't even know how to tackle. some of them. What are we going to do for them? Like if we're focusing up here, let's focus down here as well.
Sounds like though you've got, it sounds like you're gunning for a job as the NRL head coach of tackling technique, mate, because it sounds amazing. But two, it sounds like there's so many other things you can do to teach tackling. It could be a ladder, it can be footwork, it can be sprinkle toes, it might even be body weight. It doesn't always need to be the collision. That collision might be, 10 minutes of the training, and then you might have another 40 minutes around the footwork. So it sounds like there's a ton of stuff you can do. We've just got to get away from the old school way of, how you learn to tackle, you run at a bag or you run at a bloke or you do whatever.
Run hard, tackle hard.
Yeah, it's rubbish. But, mate, we've been here. We've chopped enough of your time. You've got a young one that you said. Congratulations on the birth of your young baby. Boy or girl? Name? What's the where are we at with that one?
Yeah, so young boy, 5 kilos. Idris, so little Drizzy. And yeah, so he's got a brother named Caden. So I've got my halves pairing.
Yeah.
Now,
well, mate, when we're watching in 10, 15 years' time and we see some kids with twinkle toes, mate, and then the split stance, we'll know what's going on. But
I just hope they can tackle. So
yeah,
that's
it. That's it.
Guaranteed.
Mate, it's been it's been a long one today. It's been an awesome conversation. It was a pleasure to speak to you. You speak so well. You're so passionate. The thing that I loved about this conversation and why we got you on was, as I say, Ads and I are always talking about, reactive kind of action after the concussion happens. What really excites me is that, this is a preventative measure. There's so many companies coming out and trying to throw helmets at people and this and that. Mate, at the end of the day, if we're teaching kids the appropriate technique, using the right language, developing their confidence, creating trust, creating, a confidence to take on the tackle and do it correctly, then that's prevention. That's massive, and it's free. So I just think if we can teach athletes how to, move better, position their body better and how to tackle properly, then maybe we've got a chance of kind of reducing, the danger of head impacts and concussions moving forward. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Preventative maintenance is always better than disaster recovery, right? I echo Cliff's comments. Rob, can't thank you enough for being here, mate. We really, really support what you're doing. And we could talk for hours on this, and no doubt we will over time. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Knock On Effect podcast. If you've got anything out of this, make sure you share it with anybody that you think also might get something out of us. It's been a pleasure, Rob. Thanks for being here, mate, and we'll catch you all next time.
Thanks,
Adam,
Rob.
Cliff, thank you very much, guys.
Cheers,
thanks for having us.